The third belief is the belief in the prophets and messengers of God. These were special people sent to mankind as a mercy and guidance from God. They called for altruism, higher consciousness, and upholding justice, and they taught against the way of greed, immorality, and corruption. We believe that Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is the final prophet of God. He is an exemplary figure, who is followed and revered by billions of people worldwide. In past years, we have seen how Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, has become the target of cartoonists and satirists. This in turn led to Muslim anger around the world, and hot debates about freedom of speech.
A drawing of the Prophet Mohammed showing him with a bomb in a turban led to outrage among Muslim communities all over the world.
An anti-Islam film sparked more protests against the US. As the anger grows, we ask why such an obscure production should provoke this strong reaction, and whether or not such films should be allowed under the rules of free speech.
This is a trailer which is a provocation. It was done deliberately and deceptively. Apparently, one of the actors says they didn't even know what the film was about. It was just a gig by a guy who may or may not be the person he claims to be. This guy Steve Klein, who's one of the big boosters of this film, has been involved in all sorts of efforts to kind of demean, denigrate Islam, as a political gesture. This is not about free speech in a vague, theoretical sense. This is a deliberate effort which has worked to stir up hatred. It's hate speech. That's what this is about.
Charlie Hebdo, a satirical magazine, has been attacked before. Just over 3 years ago, its premises were firebombed after it published a caricature of the Prophet Muhammad. Shortly after this morning's attack, the French president came to issue a message of defiance on behalf of his nation.
Mr. Mustafa, why should we not be allowed to poke fun at your religion?
If people a lot of your listeners out there would appreciate that we live in a world which is complex and where there's a variety of people, Muslims, atheists, etc. For societal harmony, every society restricts, bans, curtails certain types of speech. Somebody on Facebook set up a terrible page a few days ago talking about the 2 police women who were tragically murdered. And understandably, there was uproar about that this is beyond the pale. So there are always red lines in every society. And likewise in Muslim societies, and for Muslims, insulting a very beloved man, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, castigating him as a womanizer, etc., is a red line. And Muslims say, look, for decency and to be civilized, others should not demand the right to insult that. So there is a difference of values here, actually. This is one of the fundamental issues here. People in the West, many of the listeners may have certain values. We live in secular societies. People in the Muslim world, and Muslims they don't hold this sacred cow, freedom of speech. And dare I say, it actually doesn't exist, this freedom of speech, as we're lectured about.
Free speech does not exist anywhere in absolute form. There is no absolute freedom to insult. We have defamation laws, sedition laws, professional standards, journalistic standards about reporting about celebrities and politicians. In Germany, denial of the Holocaust is prohibited by law. In the UK, the Public Order Act makes, quote, threatening, abusive or insulting words an offence. In Australia, the Commonwealth Criminal Code makes it an offence for a person to use a postal or similar service in a way that reasonable persons would regard as offensive. As for in practice, Azhar Ahmed in the UK was convicted just last year for grossly offensive communications. He had commented on Facebook that British soldiers in Afghanistan should die and go to hell. In Australia, a Muslim man was convicted just a few months ago for letters deemed offensive which he sent to the families of dead Australian soldiers under the above-mentioned criminal code provision. These are but 2 of many examples that may be cited. Free speech, we may surmise, is used as a political tool, yielded selectively. Who decides about when and how to qualify free speech?
6 years ago, Cine, who was a cartoonist in the same journal, made a joke on the Jewish affiliation of Sarkozy's son, and he was fired within 2 weeks. And my question to them was then, how come you are speaking about freedom of expression and there is a double standard? If we are against racism, we should be against all racisms. And if we are for freedom of expression, it has to be the same for all.
The most popular, best-known cartoonist, or rather comedian in France, Dieudonné, was arrested for tweeting a joke about the Charlie Hebdo attack, a joke that did not sit well with the authorities. And he wasn't the only one. There were others, including there was a teenager who was arrested for doing a Charlie Hebdo parody.
All he did was he merely substituted the Quran for a Charlie Hebdo magazine and substituted the Muslim man for a French cartoonist, and he was arrested for justifying terrorism. And he just literally copied the front cover of the Charlie Hebdo magazine, but instead of making it Muslims, he made it Charlie Hebdo themselves, and he was arrested. So much for free speech. There'll be no demonstration.
This is not about freedom. This is about how far power can go. It's about using power. It's about power using the notion of freedom to extend and enforce itself. Ultra-liberals may say here, look, we disagree with all these laws, with all these cases, and we affirm freedom of speech, unqualified, carte blanche. But is such a position really conducive to society? Would we accept white people using the N-word against blacks, or a person shouting fire in a theatre such as ours? Or a student insulting his teacher, a child their parent? Everyone, all of us teach their kids to respect others, not to insult. Why? We can't have it both ways. Some forget perhaps that even in the Western tradition, free speech was upheld as a most basic value for specific ends, to allow profession of ideas, inquiry into truths, and the ability to account government. Does any of these noble ends, all of which Islam demands, I hasten to add, require the freedom to insult? Or does insult, in fact, defeat their very purpose?
Je suis Charlie. What this event did was it united huge numbers of people in the West and around the world behind the slogan, I am Charlie, Je suis Charlie. We are Charlie. We are this Charlie Hebdo magazine that was supposedly shot up. Well, what does that mean? You're identifying with this magazine that during the past several years had been going way over the top, printing obscene, and not just blasphemous, but blatantly obscene attacks on Islam, basically doing pornographic attacks on Islamic sacred symbols.
Peter, heb jij wel eens gezegd, je suis Charlie?
Nee, en dat zal ik ook nooit zeggen.
Waarom niet?
Omdat ik dat gewoon niet ben en omdat ik eigenlijk ook wel vind... ik vind het verschrikkelijk dat die mensen zijn doodgeschoten, maar ik vind ook niet dat er veel rechtvaardiging is voor het ridiculiseren van een godsdienst. En dat is wat zij stelselmatig hebben gedaan. En ik vind dat heel veel cartoonisten hun vrijheid misbruiken door tekeningen te maken die niet uitstijgen boven het niveau van je moeder is een hoer. Want daar komt het op neer. En, dus ik zal zelf nooit zeggen, je suis Charlie. Nou ja, dat we heel goed moeten nadenken hoe we verder gaan. Of we willen dat dit verder escaleert, voordat we ons een beetje verantwoordelijk gaan gedragen. We hebben in Nederland tot voor kort eigenlijk ook een verbod op godslastering in de wet gehad. We mogen nog steeds ons koningshuis niet beledigen. Dan word je opgepakt. We mogen geen grappen maken over de Holocaust. Op het moment dat wij grappen zouden maken over Anne Frank, zou misschien de hele zaal daar ook schande van spreken en zeggen dat dat niet kan. Nou, dan moeten we ons een klein beetje verplaatsen in wat dat voor andere mensen misschien betekent. En ik bespeur dat dat gewoon veel te weinig gebeurt.
For the past few months there have been these Draw Mohammed events, encouraging people to draw insulting cartoons of sacred Islamic symbols and figures. Even on the 4th of July, there were 4th of July picnic and fairground events that were Draw Mohammed events.
Insult is not an acceptable mode of interaction for mature, self-respecting people. It is the modus operandi of the pseudo-intellectual with nothing to offer, no intent to engage, only projecting their own insecurities onto others. As for critique, as apart from insult, then bring it on, honestly. Let me be very clear that stifling of serious debate is unacceptable. It's unacceptable in Islam. Insults of any beliefs or people is not. Critique Islam all you want. Write in intellectual tones about why it is not the truth, about why the Prophet is not a prophet, etc., etc. Such books fill the bookstores in the West as it is. Go to one of your local best-selling bookstores and you'll see these books. None of them have ever resulted in a riot, but to mock, to denigrate, to provoke, to agitate, that is something else. Insult offers nothing to society except hate and divisiveness. It is not required for the pursuit of truth, for open inquiry, for accounting governments, and nor does it allow for a cohesive society. It is unacceptable. All beliefs and sanctities, all should be protected from insult, including that which is most sacred to billions around the world, God and His prophets, peace be upon them all. This should be done in our present context by the elevation of values, not the imposition of law. Let me be clear about that. You cannot regulate civility. You cannot force people to be respectful. This is about elevating the human condition, reviving the sacred and the most basic of human decency, excavated by secular liberalism in the most hideous of ways. The fact that we're even still having this debate, to be entirely frank, is the ultimate insult. Thank you.